Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kastuba. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and my co-host, Kastuba, is prancing around Venice, eating vegan gelato and pizza.
I think he's actually headed back to the States now.
I think he's heading back to the States? Oh, I thought he was skipping through Venice with his shoes off and spinning.
That was yesterday afternoon, perhaps.
Well, it's good to be back at Super Soul Farm. I've also got like 6 teenage boys from Alachua, Florida, who came in. Yeah, I had like a big family that we had 6 kids from Alachua, all Krishna kids, growing up Krishna. That are friends with my 16-year-old. So we're having like a 16-year-old Krishna kid party here. We have I shipped my daughter off for the summer to her boyfriends in California, and stay with their devotee parents, nice devotee parents.
Yeah, can I say something about these? I was like, oh, great. We've got 6 teenage boys coming to stay with us. Like, teenagers just like the worst age anyway, but
Teenagers are pretty bad.
these are the nicest kids ever. They are so sweet.
Weren't they sweet? They were like, oh, can I serve out? What can I do to help set the table? I was like, who are you people?
All of them multiple times were like, how can I help? What should I do? Should I set the table? Should I clear the table? It was so
Shout out to the parents in Alachua for doing good jobs. It's quite impressive. Making Rocco look pretty bad.
well, that's a payback, because when Rocco was staying with them, remember, the kids were saying like, oh man, Rocco offered to like go out and help break the leaves and help my parents in the yard all day. He made us look so bad. And I was like, Rocco was helping?
And I was like, look, go to bed early. They're like, should we wake up early tomorrow? I was like, yeah, wake up early. I'll put you to work. I'm gonna give you an hour of work. And they're like, okay, that's all right. An hour of work. So anyway, it's good. It's good. But there is something about your daughter going away. You know, when I was 18 and I went away, I was just sort of like, I never went back. It was almost like you go through a threshold and never come back again. I don't know if that's going to be it or not, but it was very emotional. Anyway, we had a great class yesterday with Pradyumna, who's staying at Super Soul Farm. Pradyumna is the original translator of the Bhagavatam with Srila Prabhupada. But guess what? He's still here. I'm going to drag him back out of his room. I'm going to go get Mara to get him. And he's leaving today. And he's one of these people that's got so much information in his skull. And we just went for a japa walk, which we didn't end up doing any japa with him, but we just talked. And I tell you, so much valuable yogic information from all levels. And he knew everybody. And, it's sort of like an interesting time in the history of Krishna consciousness. And before you want to make an announcement, make an announcement.
Thanks. Michelle Berger is offering an asana class for our Patreon members today at 3:30. And there's Back to Recovery group meetings at 1 and 9:30 p.m. Eastern time.
All right. I have a few announcements here. By the way, our last call for our 200-hour Bhakti Vinyas yoga teacher training, that's happening. Oh, it starts tomorrow. So it is the last call. But some people are coming up to doing the farm stay. So if you're interested in that, You can send Mara an email, supersoultrainings@gmail.com, ASAP. It's July 13th to the 28th. You come up, you stay at the farm, and you sort of audit some of the classes, or just get away. Some people are coming just to get away from life, and that's okay too. That's understandable. Also, me and Lori Pag, who's our regular Zoomer, are doing a retreat here at the farm September 8th through the 10th. September 1st through the 4th, we're having chant camp, which is lots of chanting all weekend. I'm also teaching at the Ahimsa Yoga Festival this year in upstate New York. I'm teaching at Bhakti Fest September 15th, and that's in Joshua Tree. And I'll be in Nashville with Hot Yoga Cindy. And also, my pilgrimage is happening October 16th to the 28th. Really excited for this. We're going to check out all these holy cities: Varanasi, Udaipur, Nathdwar, Haridwar, Rishikesh, Vrindavan. I'm super excited. So that's happening. You go to my website, www.raghunath.yoga, raghunath.yoga. And if you go to raghunath.yoga, you can see all the things I'm doing this year. And also you can check it out on my link tree on my Instagram, which is @RaghunathYogi. So I'm going to start the Bhagavatam, and then I'm going to bring in Pradyumna Prabhu. And we're going to maybe go through the Bhagavatam. Maybe we'll stay on one verse. Maybe we'll go through more. And I'd love to pick his brain and get some insight. So let's jump right in. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayom madirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan. Unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayesha vadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart will become eradicated. And loving service to the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, will be established as an irrevocable fact. Om Agyanat Timarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Midatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My teachers are opening my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge. I offer my obeisances at their lotus feet. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 19, Text 13. Please welcome everybody. Pradyumna Prabhu. I wish I had like a clapping track to play. Welcome to the show, Prabhu. It's great to have you. Come real close to me if you don't mind. It's great to have you, and it's great just walking around the house talking to you. It's great to go on japa walks and not chant japa and just talk to you. And I'm just glad you're part of my life, and I'm going to petition you to be a fixture here at Super Soul.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
And we found out yesterday, which I didn't know, he grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, very close to us. And you also were saying it's a holy place of source, Springfield, Mass.
Well, yes. It is the I always thought it was a special place, a spring field, a spring, fresh water rushing up from the field. How do you like that?
I like it. So we have this verse today from the Bhagavatam, and I just thought maybe you'd like to comment on it. And then we could, sometimes that can turn into other stories, but you definitely have more to say about all of these verses than I do. So I'd like to hear you. This is text 13. I'll read the English. O my Lord, master of all mystic yoga, this is the explanation of the yoga system spoken by Lord Brahma, Hiranyagarbha, who is self-realized. At the time of death, all yogis give up their material bodies with full detachment, simply by placing their minds at your lotus feet. That is the perfection of yoga. Would you like to hold the microphone for this one?
Okay.
Okay, we got to talk right into it.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. Let's go to Patanjali for a minute. He begins the Yoga Sutra with the first sutra, Asa Yoga Anushasanam, and the Ata means now at this point in time, and Yoga Anushasanam is is two words, yoga and anushasanam. Anushasanam is also two words, really, anu and shasanam. Shasana means instruction or discipline of yoga, and anu means after. And the commentaries say that shishtasya shasanam, anushasanam. The anushasanam means the instruction, shishtasya, of what has already been instructed. So Patanjali is not making up something new. He's taking it from what's come down in the line. And when the commentators comment on this, they'll say that it originated from Hiranyagarbha.
The commentators say that.
The commentators say that, and they quote the Yogi Yajnavalkya, which says, Hiranyagarbho yogasya bhakta nanyak puratanaha. That Hiranyagarbha is the original instructor, the original speaker of yoga, no one else. Hiranyagarbho yogasya bhakta nanyak puratanaha. And some of the other commentaries trace down from Hiranyagarbha to Kapila to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Is Hiranyagarbha Brahma?
Well, it seems in many cases they say yes, it's Brahma, the original person. Others seem to say it maybe it's someone else. It's also mentioned in Mahabharata that there is a chain of disciplic succession in yoga, and the first speaker is Hiranyagarbha or Brahma. So isn't that interesting? And
especially when, can I jump in for a second? Especially when you have things like nowadays people will, especially in the yoga community, and you've seen all atrocities in the yoga community, people will just take verses out of context and they'll say, okay, well, this verse means to me this, or here's my translation of this, or I found a translation, now I'm going to elaborate on it. But you're saying even the author himself is saying this is from a greater context. It's not like you can just take the carburetor out of a car and figure out like, well, what is this carburetor? What do we do with this? The carburetor has a greater context. It has and has a function within the car.
Yeah, can't take it out the carburetor and put a corn cob in to replace it. So the commentators emphasize the importance of parampara. So there are two types of parampara: the Guru parampara and the Andha parampara. The succession of the blind. Andha means blind. So the succession in which of the gurus and succession of the blind, and you have that old the biblical, and also in the Upanishads, Katha Upanishad, that when the blind lead the blind, they just fall into the ditch. So what does blind mean in terms of yoga succession? Yeah, what does it mean? So when you have someone who's blind, say blind from birth, there are some things that they can understand even though they can't see. Like they can feel the table and the wood is hard, or they can feel the pillow is soft. But if you want to describe a brown or brownish yellow or reddish pink, then they have no idea. They have the word, but not the experience. So the Andha parampara means that there's a transmission of the letter of the law, the letter of the scripture, but not the experience.
Wow.
So the real parampara is coming down in the terms of not only passing down the scripture, the word, the transmission in terms of not only word but also experience. So under parampara. Now the thing about parampara is that it's supposed to be like a holeless hose. Like liquid water passes down a hose.
Right.
And there's no leaks. It doesn't leak out and nothing else comes in. But that transmission is only good if it starts off right.
Sure.
If it doesn't start off right, then what's being passed down, it might be garbage. So the initial speaker of the parampara is very important. So here it's interesting. It starts with Brahma, Hiranyagarbha. And then if you can keep it pristine, then the parampara, then the concept, the method works.
Can I ask you a question in this regard? This is a great topic. Mara, maybe you can fix this light a little. So sure, this is the sort of the premise of everything that we're staying at. Everything is coming down, trickling down from Krishna to Brahma to the sages, and breaking down into different branches. And of course, it's ending up in our lap in Brooklyn, New York, or wherever we picked, or Springfield, Massachusetts. But my question is, okay, we've all played the telephone game. I whisper, she sells seashells by the seashore. We pass that around for 10 people, 30 people, thousands of people we're talking about. This isn't 10 people even. This isn't like at a birthday party. This is thousands of years. How do we not come out with a completely different thing? Like, even in my short lifetime in Krishna consciousness, I see how people take one thing and run with it, or take something else and run with it, and make not the main thing the main thing. We say the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Krishna is God. He's the origin of everything. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. How do we not twist that? We see it twisted even in our own life. So can you explain, are there faults with the parampara, or is the fault with the people? Or can you explain practically how parampara can work?
Well, you know, that verse in the Gita is that Krishna says to Arjuna that this yoga was passed down for a long time, and in the end it became nashta. It was lost. After a long time, it was lost. And then and the words used are this sanatana, you know, this avyaya yoga, this inexhaustible or eternal yoga was lost. Well, how does the eternal yoga? It doesn't become lost. It just becomes absent for a time. And Ramanuja comments there that it becomes lost because of the laziness of the students. So one student grasped, you know, he couldn't get everything. He only got 2/3. And the next generation of students couldn't get 2/3. They only got 1/3. And it reduces and more until finally it's lost. So that's interesting. He says the yoga itself can't be lost, but in the transmission, due to the laziness of the student, it gets lost. And in the Bhagavatam, it says, Mandaksa Mandamatayo Mandabhagyahi Bhadrataha, that in the age of Kali Yuga, people are slow learners. And even if they're smart, they're good, then they have, life is short. Right. And that even if life is long, that they're always disturbed. So they can't, they don't have time. And even if they have time, they can't concentrate. Even if they concentrate some, they can't remember it. So that things get lost. And part of that is the state of the mind. So when you look at things from the beginning of the Yoga Sutra, that the mind can be more consisting of the vrittis, which are more tamasic or more rajasic or more sattvic. And the more that the mind is sattvic, the more it will be able to receive accurately, and it will be able to retain, and it'll be able to also to transmit. So it depends upon the purity of the instrument. In this case, the mind. So then you have all the different practices to ensure that the mind is pure and that it remains pure. So it really depends upon the state of the mind. Otherwise, the mind is the slayer of the real. This is an old saying.
Slayer of the real? The
slayer of the real, because it immediately on hearing something, the mind, because of its because of the way in which it leans, it will interpret that in its own way, and then the original message is lost. The original teaching is lost. So that's the story.
How do we know we don't have the? How do we know we have the real teaching and not the fake teaching?
The proof is in the pudding.
I guess the pudding in this case would be happily enthused and falling in love with sweet baby Krishna.
He knows, she glows, it shows.
Okay, so you want to continue with what you were saying before we keep this a little bit conversational, although I really want to just hear you speak, but I'll go back and forth with a little bit if you don't mind. Please take no offense. I have to explain that to all the great souls we have on this show. Okay, I'm going to ask you, and there's a little feedback. We got to go keep this mic right on your mouth because it's a very sensitive mic too. Okay, please continue.
Well, where do we go from here?
Oh, okay. I thought you were talked about parampara. We can go right to the next verse if you like. I can read the English, and if we can just read it and we can comment on it, or we can read Prabhupada's purport, and we can talk about what it was like translating. You translated the actual. What was your job for Prabhupada?
My job was just editing the Sanskrit. So Prabhupada did all the translations except for the last chapter that we did of the 10th canto. This is the 13th chapter. Then Prabhupada asked me to translate that.
Can I just ask, like, what was it like for you? You're going through the entire Bhagavatam. Was it almost like a race against time? Because Prabhupada was getting older, and
well, it was a race to keep up with Prabhupada. He was, Srila Prabhupada was very, very disciplined. Yeah. He ate at a particular time. He was quite exact about that. He said you should always the affairs of the body should be done at a particular time to keep this rhythm. You shouldn't disturb it. So you should eat at a particular time, rest at a particular time. And, he wouldn't interrupt his meal for anything. He used to say that if there's a business deal and it's 100,000 rupees, no, don't interrupt your lunch. Unless it's 200,000. If it only has to be 200,000 rupees, you don't interrupt your meal. So, and he always ate quietly by himself. He's not talking. He's just concentrating on eating. So very concentrated, very disciplined. He went to bed at a certain time, got up at a certain time, and worked all morning. Then he did japa. Then he went for his walk, his exercise. Then back to give a class. Then to take something to eat, rest a little, and then again the work.
What was his night schedule? Go to bed. What time did he wake up?
He usually went to bed around 10:30. Yeah, and he'd get up around 1:30. Yeah, and work. Yeah, work all in that quiet nighttime.
That's 3 hours. Did he take a nap in the day? Did he take a siesta?
Yeah, he took a nap after lunch. And sometimes in the morning after breakfast. It depended on how he felt also, because his health was up and down, particularly in the last part of his life.
If you can see how much we've drifted, I mean, my father was pretty regulated as well, but if you could see how much we've drifted to fast food, text messaging while we're eating, driving and eating. I want to say, and just want to be frank out there, I'm guilty of all these things, Prabhu. I'm not regulated. I'm a little bit fallen, and it's quite humiliating to announce that publicly, and especially because I'm leading this podcast. But I'm hearing this, and I'm thinking, okay, I need to auto correct. I need to recalibrate. I need to I know with kids too. If you have kids and they have things you got to go to, it's a whole nother world of disorganization. Should I wait before she gets home from drama class or band practice, or before we eat with everybody, because I want to eat with everybody? But regulation, I find, as culture progresses, it's Kali Yuga is really setting in.
Well, yeah, so many activities, so many interruptions. But that's the thing. Interesting, when Prabhupada was a young boy, one of his friends said, yeah, he used to bicycle over to my house every morning before school. He'd play a game of chess. He'd beat me every day. Then we go off to school.
It's a great story. Okay, so here's the next verse. This is text 14, and this is pretty heavy verse. Materialists are generally very attached to their present bodily comforts and to the bodily comforts they expect in the future. Materialists are generally very attached to their bodily comforts and to the bodily comforts they expect in the future. Therefore, they're always absorbed in thoughts of their wives, right, or their spouses, their children, their wealth, right, their bank balance, and are afraid of giving up their bodies, which are full of stool and urine. You hear this a lot in Vedic talk. Vedic speaks stool and urine. Basically, the body is like the body's foul. Just like if you see blood, if you're doing a sport and you see somebody's blood on the ground, you're like, oh, that's disgusting. So we're thinking, yeah, the body is inside this very pristine body. It's very dirty. If a person engaged in bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness, however, is also afraid of giving up his body, what is the use of having labor to study the Shastras? It was simply a waste of time. So this is sort of like goading us towards, look, this stuff is real. It's not just becoming your religion now. We have to I'm going to start this, and then I'm just going to pass the mic to you if it's okay. We're not saying that the Bhagavatam is not saying that the family isn't important. Family is very important. It's a big part of Vedic culture. It's not saying that children aren't important, etc. It's not saying that your career is not important. It's not saying that taking care of your body is not important. We don't mean to start your day hearing these messages. But we do mean to say is that we don't own any of these things. They are not the all in all. We have to have a much bigger picture than this is everything. And it's goading us towards our spiritual identity, or else this becomes just a church, another church we join with some religious practices, but we don't get what we're supposed to get out of bhakti. Would you like to please elaborate?
Yeah. Well, if you go back to Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, the first instruction of Krishna is focused on the individual. The first instruction, it's interesting because in other scriptures, like Christian scriptures or I don't know about Islam, but in Christianity and Jewish scriptures. So you have in the beginning, God is creating. God is the big creator, the all-powerful one, and the source of everything. And okay, so pointing first to the absolute, the big absolute. But Bhagavad Gita is pointing to the microcosm, to the individual. And the first thing is that, you don't know what you're doing. Your understanding is misplaced, and then dealing with the problems of the individual. For instance, in 14th verse of the second chapter, that matra sparshast konteya shitoshna sukha dukkha. Your feelings of happiness or unhappiness are just the result of the experience of your senses, the contact between your senses and the objects of the senses. Your experience of happiness and unhappiness are the result of the contact between your senses and the objects of the senses. And therefore you should just forbear them. You should just tolerate them.
Can I ask you a question about that? Hold that thought. I'm a constant interruption and ruiner of flow. But is this why yogis will do extreme things to their body? Like, okay, this is just an experience happening here. My pleasure is just an experience. My pain is just an experience. So I'm going to put my body in an extremely painful position. So you see these yogis who would lay on bed of nails or do, ridiculous things to create pain on the body. Is this why they do that? To create a severance from the material frame?
Well, I can't say exactly why. I don't have an idea on that. But in yoga, there is anga jugupsata. There is a kind of that is, as you become less attached to the body and less occupied by the experience of the senses and the body, the fleshy tabernacle, as they describe it sometimes, the sack of flesh. So you become less absorbed in that, and then and through the purifying practices of yoga, you have a kind of the word is a kind of a disgust with the body. Because you have a more ethereal, a higher level of experience. I can just say that. And anyway, back to the Gita verse. So it's just the experience of the senses contacting the objects of the senses. So as the objects of the senses change, obviously your experience is going to change. And the objects of the senses are changing all the time, whether it's the weather or you're walking in the Upper East Side and then you're walking down in the Lower East Side, or the environment changes and your sensory experience changes, and you're either pleased and happy, or you see things which you'd rather not see, or they're kind of disgusting, and you're unhappy. So that's interesting. He says you're happy because of your experience of your environment. That's all. So the body, the body is part of our environment. If you want to say, who is the seer? In the Yoga Sutra, in Yoga and Sankhya, everything is divided into only two things. There's Purusha and Prakriti. And the actual seer of things is the Purusha. And everything else is seen. There's only two categories, the seer and the seen. The observer and the observed. And there's only one observer. Everything else is observed. That means the body is observed. The subtle bodies of the mind is observed. All these things are on the side of Prakriti, not on the side of Purusha. It's really separating things. And so we become enmeshed, in the experiences of of Prakriti, in all the different levels of Prakriti. And for each one of those, we get an experience that either we like it or we don't like it. We like and dislike. And that's part of our, so in yoga also with the kleshas, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Because of the initial avidya, the original ignorance, then we get this sense of asmita, of claiming and identifying with a particular body, a particular, sense of senses, etc. And because of that, then we have raga and dvesha. We have a passionate desire to have, to experience, and dvesha, a desire to avoid. And then we get involved in our what will protect me. We want to be protected. We want to be saved. We don't want to die. And that abhinivesha, the last klesha, is something that can be seen even in an insect. Runs away from you, right? So avidya, and there it's described that this avidya, this ignorance. What is that ignorance? Is it for a fourth grader? Is it ignorance of calculus and algebra? No, it's not a specific ignorance. It's the not knowing who you are. It's a more a fundamental ignorance. Yeah, and that ignorance is something out of which everything else comes, and that's said to be the kshetra, the field in which all the other kleshas grow, and provides the soil which they grow. It's the space in which they grow, and it's the soil from which they grow. So as strong as the avidya is, so strong will be your asmita, your sense of self. And that sense of self is the identification with your comfortable body or your uncomfortable body. So, and then from that we get to whatever strange raga, whatever. We all have these individual peculiar attachments and desires, and then peculiar dislikes and phobias, and all these things are peculiar things depending upon the particular asmita, and then depending upon our avidya. So everything is goes back to that. So this, if you look at these verses through that lens, and that's helpful.
Sure. Yeah. It's very interesting also in the yoga community because a lot of times we get into yoga because of our body. We want to be more mobile within our body, more peaceful within our body, more joyful in our body. I've neglected my body and now I've got to do something about my body. And there comes a time where you start to get proud of your body. You're like, I can do this with my body. And look how my body is. I've lost weight now with my body. So it's the very thing that you're saying, like these type of yogis would develop almost like a disgust with the body because they realize I've been pampering it my entire life and trying to fulfill its whims, both the subtle and gross. And I'm not it at all. And you're saying it's the genesis of all illusion. So yoga has to lead you to that point, right? Where you feel like it's not me, actually. Now, maybe disgust is a harsh word. But
you know, in the Yoga Sutra, that's one reason, for instance, Krishnamacharya says that that's one reason why Ishvara Pranidhana is there as one of the niyamas. That whatever practice, spiritual, or if it's just a physical practice or a mental practice or a spiritual, whatever practice you undertake, will form some kind of an ego in you, that you're good or you're better than others. Yeah. And that the system requires surrender to a higher, to a greater. Without that surrender, then you're left with the yogi ego. All right. So the Ishvara Pranidhana is actually the commentator says it's a kind of bhakti. It's a bhakti vishesha. Vyasa, the commentator, says it's a bhakti vishesha. It's a kind of bhakti, this Ishvara Pranidhana. So when whatever form that Ishvara is, the higher being, the God in some form or another, an absolute, if you surrender it, then offer everything to him in that way, then it allows you to escape that ego. Otherwise, you're caught.
You're a great pundit of the Yoga Sutras. Would you say Yoga Sutras are speak about this dvaita, this duality between the soul and God? Some people say, well, we're all one. We become God. Yoga Sutras endorse that. Is there a definitive answer?
Yeah, well, most of the Vedanta is dualistic, for instance, and you get this monism more through Shankaracharya's his thought, his view, and some other systems in India also. But that's why the Shankaracharya rejects yoga as a system, because he says they're Dvaitis, they're dualists. This is the word he uses in the yoga, in the Vedanta Sutra. There's one sutra about yoga. Etena yoga pratyuktaha. Etena, by this, means by the same, for the same reason which Sankhya as a system is unacceptable in some ways. Etena yoga pratyuktaha. Yoga is spoken against, is rejected, is refuted. So as a system, he doesn't like the dualism of the Prakriti Purusha and several other things which finds him potentially. So there's a kind of a difference there. But the yoga as a practice, of course, is everywhere in the Upanishads and everyone, but in a particular way that it's dualistic, that Shankara doesn't like that, rejects that. So anyway, so there are these differences.
We were speaking yesterday, just in the kitchen, which is where some of our better conversations have poured out. Like these fascinating child saints, not just child saints, but child like pundits. They're like incredibly learned at such young ages. And you just like this wonderkind or this child prodigies. Madhvacharya you were mentioning was 14 years old or 12 years old, 8 years old for Shankaracharya, who's initiating thousands of people, traveling by foot with groups of disciples at age 8. It's like, it's almost unbelievable, but they're historical figures. You want to talk about childhood saints, and if you met any childhood saints while we're at it? In all your travels through India, you must have been a child saint.
I think I saw some. It says it's strange. Of course, it's according to the philosophy, it's due to a purva samskara, a previous impressions, that previous life, and then you get a Mozart in music, or you get someone else in, etc. And you get these wonderful saints that understand things right away when they're young. They know the Gita, and then they go on from there. Shankara's first commentary was on the Gita, and Madhvacharya's first commentary that he wrote was on the Gita, like that. And then
Was Prabhupada's guru's commentary on the Gita first also?
he never commented on it.
He never commented on the Gita. Okay.
He edited the Gita several times, but he edited his father's Bengali commentary on the Gita, but he didn't make one himself.
Interesting. That brought me to this other thing that you said the other day. I was talking about the Brahma Samhita, and you were saying, the Brahma Samhita was found. This is the history that we hear about. It was just found in South India. It's all these glorifications of Krishna from Lord Brahma, after Brahma had this famous pastime where Krishna stole the cowherd boys and the calves. And then you were saying, yeah, I said, how did you first hear about the Brahma Samhita? And you want to tell a little background about the history of us publishing the Brahma Samhita? It's these very beautiful prayers, the Song of Brahma, that some of you are familiar with and some of you are unfamiliar with. But Prabhu told me this very interesting way it was found.
Yeah, well, back in the mid '60s, we didn't know much about anything. We had Prabhupada had the 3 volumes of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and we had a manuscript, Bhagavad Gita as it is in manuscript, and people were working with it. And it was 1967 in the summer that Achyutananda Brahmachari and I were staying in 26 Second Avenue, and we walked over a few blocks to a bookstore. It was called Orientalia. It's no longer there. I think it was on 4th Avenue. And people used to go there. It was kind of the esoteric bookstore, let's say that. And all the books were just piled up, stacked up in the back room. So we went over and we're looking through the books, and we found this book, Sri Brahma Samhita. Wow, what's this? I opened it up, and it had a picture of Bhakti Siddhanta inside. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Wow. So we bought it, and we walked back to 26th Avenue. We went up to Prabhupada's apartment. Prabhupada was there. I mean, wow, Dan. And we said, look, we found this in the bookstore. Brahma Samhita. Is it bona fide?
He said that.
We said that. Is it bona fide? And gave it to him. He took the book and he opened it up. It's a picture of his Guru Maharaj, and he put the book to his forehead. And he said, oh, yes. He said, I had this by heart. Yes, it is bona fide. Handed it back to us. So that was the first Brahma Samhita we had. That was the first we knew about it, really. And later on, a few months later, or maybe it was the next, it must have been a few months later, Prabhupada chanted the Brahma Samhita, the Govindam Bhajami prayers in Los Angeles, and they were recorded. And then to go along with that recording, someone had transcribed the words and transliterated the words. And that recording came, and also the transliteration of the lyrics. And when I looked at it, I could see, yes, it was not all quite right. And I had the text. I had the book that we bought, and we had the original Sanskrit in there. So I thought maybe I'll just do this, transliterate this, and put the proper diacritic marks in there. So I did a few verses, and I sent it to Srila Prabhupada in Los Angeles. And then I got this beautiful, astonishing letter in reply. Those days we mailed letters.
You mailed letters to each other. Fascinating. First of all, the whole concept of mailing a letter is like, it's so archaic right now. Sometimes people mail me letters, and I'm thinking, what are they thinking? How am I supposed to respond to this? Now you've given me this great task that I have to go to a post office. Okay, so Prabhupada wrote you this beautiful letter.
And of course, the letters were written with a pen or a pencil.
Sure.
Also, yeah, on paper. He wrote me this wonderful letter back saying, "Oh, this is a great service. Please transliterate the whole book. Do the whole book and continue on. This will be a great service to the society if you can do this." So I felt fantastic, and that was really opened up my work in Sanskrit. After that, that was kind of the opening.
Now you did the translations of that, or you did the what? I don't understand what you did.
I just did transliteration of the Sanskrit verses.
Okay, the transliteration, that's like the word for word. Who did the actual translation, and their Prabhupada's gurus commentaries?
The Brahma Samhita that we have was published in Sanskrit and in English in about 1932, 1933, and I think from Madras, and it had the Sanskrit verses. It had the Sanskrit in Devanagari script of Jiva Goswami's commentary, and then it had an English translation of each verse, and then an English translation, an English commentary. And actually, the English translation, the English commentary were translations of Bhakti Vinod Thakur's original Bengali. Wow. It's not stated very well.
You're saying that book that you found, that's
People, but it's published by BBT, published in India whatsoever. And the translation was done, I believe, by two disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, whose English was very good. And the overall editor was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Okay. And that was published around the time that the Gaudiya Math was preparing materials for the preachers to go to Europe, to go to England and Germany. So I believe that they were prepared particularly for the West at that time.
wow. How many people did Bhakti Siddhanta send to the West, and how many actually went? So, by the way, so this is just to give, because we have a lot of new people, context. Prabhupada's guru, Prabhupada is the commentator on the Srimad Bhagavatam that we study, and had thousands of disciples. His guru also had, we were saying yesterday, had thousands of very, very significant disciples, thousands all over India, and opened temples all over India. So who sent him? And he desired for this message to get spread to the West. So the question is, who did he send to the West also, or who?
Well, he sent his disciple Bon Maharaj, a sannyasin, and a brahmachari, and I think one other person, three in all, to go to Germany and England in 1933, I think. And that they spent some years over there. And then he sent another batch, another sannyasi, Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha, and another one other disciple as well later in the 30s. And they were still there when he passed away in 1936, 1937. So those were the first. And they had some limited success. They met many people. They gave a lot of lectures in England and Germany as well. And two German devotees came back.
What?
Yeah, and one was a baron, and he didn't stay very long in India, but the other one did, and he became initiated. And then later on, he went back to Europe. He was translated a number of things in German.
Wow. Wait, was this the famous German sannyasi that book was? What was that book called? We just read it. Mandela put it out about the German that went before the war, and he met and got initiated on behalf of Bhakti Siddhanta in India.
Yeah, because he was there during the war, so he got interned because he was a German national. He was put in an internment camp for the war. Yeah, during the war.
So and he got initiated by that German disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's fascinating. Prabhu, this is sad, but this conversation has to come to an end, and you're leaving now and you have to catch a train. Would you like to give us any good advice for as we go?
They're chanting be happy, I suppose. Be Granada piece of Nietzsche, that's Torora piece of Hishna Amani Namana Dana Kirtani Sada Harihi.
One should be more humble than a blade of grass.
More tolerant than a tree. Give all respects to everyone and take no respect for oneself, and chant.
Always chant. Thanks, Prabhu, so much. I really appreciate your association, not just for on the show, but I'm sure everybody does. I just appreciate you having around. We please come back. Okay. Consider this your home upstate. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks to Pradyumna Prabhu. Yeah. If you have any questions, Q&A day is coming up Saturday. Email them to Mara, wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. Thanks for Kostuba's coming back. Maybe tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow. We say so. Yeah, we'll see you at 6 a.m. tomorrow Eastern time, 12 noon Euro time. And again, thanks for Pradyumna Prabhu. Thanks everybody for joining us on Zoom and all the others out there. It's a beautiful day. For a beautiful day, let the magic continue to flow. Harry Bowl.